Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. Today's comic is Action Comics, issue number 445, dated March 1975. Um, as far as the reading experience, it wasn't a terrible reading experience. The Green Arrow Black Canary B stories is actually a bit more interesting than the A story of Superman here. The Superman story is something that was this story was very typical of what you would expect from Cary Bates. And there's a lot of twist, and even the twists have twist, and there's probably too many twists in this story because it seems more convoluted than complex. Take a look at the cover. I think it's by Nick Cardy. It is. And we see Lois. Lois is centered on the cover. She looks really beautiful. She looks very fashionably dressed for 1975. So Lois is at her cosmopolitan best here. And we see that she's kind of like at the edge of town in front of a junkyard. I don't know, maybe she was visiting Fred Sanford. But we see two Supermen rushing toward her, and they're both on one side of the fence, so one isn't aware of the other. It turns out their thoughts kind of are in sync. Both of them expect to be dating Lois at this moment. So this is the scenario that we're given to encourage kids to pick up this comic. I gotta say, it is a good cover. So based on this cover, I probably would have spent my 25 cents on it as an 8-year-old. And we're told that the Superman story is a doomsday thriller. Count 10, Superman, and die. So we take a look at the splash page. Splash page was usually a preview of what we can expect in this comic. And we see the death of two possible Supermans. So immediately the story is going to be centered around, these two Supermen. One is real and the other, isn't. And one of the Supermen, he looks like he takes it from a ray beam from outer space. That's what we're told. And then the other Superman, he looks like he's gonna bite it quite painfully because he looks like he's going through some convulsions here, and poison does work itself into the story. And we're asked, which way will Superman be murked? And it turns out we're kind of given a guess as to who it might be. Because we're told in the dialogue box that this plan has been devised by, quote, the most ruthless, bloodthirsty gang of criminals in the galaxy. And title of the story is Count 10, Superman, and Die. The story is by Cary Bates. As I mentioned, this is kind of what you would expect from Cary Bates. Something that was more convoluted than complicated or complex. We see the art team. It's Kurt Swan and Kurt Schaffenberg. So it's a pretty well-drawn comic. The problem is that it doesn't have that grit that really neither of these artists were known for. And because of it, it kind of feels kind of like kids playing imaginary games than, say an actual superhero conflict. So we go into the story proper. Superman, he's out of Metropolis at this point, and it turns out he's doing a little union busting here. It looks like they want to build a highway. There's this huge rock formation in the way. So Superman just basically clears most of this with one fly through the rock formation here. I can't tell whether he's doing this for the local government or state government or the military, because we see a tank and a bulldozer here. But nevertheless, union workers will be working fewer days on this job site because Superman did most of the work, probably didn't accept any money, and Superman is, he's part of the establishment. However, it turns out that as this event is going on, there's kind of this TED talk going on with someone who looks exactly like Superman. And this is happening at the Metropolis Civic Center. And apparently this pseudo Superman is asking the rather large audience here, what's it like to be recognized as Superman wherever he goes? Because he's almost like he's an exact duplicate of Superman here. So as he's asking this rhetorical question, we see that Clark does show up in the at the TED Talk here. He's late. He's being demolished by Lois Lane here. And we're interrupted by the narrator, who's asking, how can Clark Kent be sitting in the audience, but at the same time, there's a Superman on stage? And the answer should be obvious because Cary Bates gave it to us a couple of panels earlier, that this is not really the Man of Steel. So anyway, I'm assuming that maybe Cary was thinking that no one was reading his stuff that closely, so he was just going to try to test the kids to see whether they're actually paying attention to him, and it's kind of easy to tune him out. So anyway, Clark is kind of simping to Lois, apologizing for what had happened. But he says that, he was just, he had a mountain of trouble to deal with, and that's why he was late. So anyway, we're told that the pseudo Superman is actually an actor, and he's an actor who played Superman on TV. So within the DC universe, we have the actual Superman that does exist there, but at the same time, the public was clamoring for so much Superman that they demanded that a Superman TV show be created. And apparently, I guess it was kind of a hit here. So that seems a little odd that you would need to know the fictional adventures of Superman while you actually have the real Superman in your reality. So it turns out that this character actually had appeared before. And it turns out he was an actor, and there was some type of accident on set, and he became severely disfigured. I'm kind of thinking that maybe the genesis of this was the stories about the Wizard of Oz. And apparently some of the actors had some real health events involving the makeup, including the woman who played the Wicked Witch of the West, Margaret Hamilton. They had used copper makeup, and because of kind of like a flash blowing up in her face, the makeup started to ignite, and it almost caused her very severe burns. It didn't, although she did carry on some health issues, serious health issues due to this this makeup. So anyway, the actor's explaining that he was disfigured, that Earth medicine or Earth plastic surgery at the time couldn't really do much to help him. But it turns out Superman can, because Superman apparently has super medical knowledge and skill powers. That was like one of the many powers that he was given. He had operated on some other characters before. I believe he operated on Lois Lane once when she was turned into a mermaid. And Superman had to come in, he had to perform the operation to restore Lois to what she was, with legs and vajayjay and all that. So it turns out that the actual Superman had operated on him. Now, of course, it would be nice if Cary Bates gave us this character's name, but he doesn't do so at this point. Technically, he was introduced in an earlier issue of Action Comics, but nevertheless, well, I'm just going to call him Pseudo Clark. And it turns out that Pseudo Clark was being operated on by Superman. Superman asked him basically, "How do you want me to change your face? I can give you a new face. I can make you look like this guy, this guy, this guy, whatever." And the guy picked Superman. He says, "You know what? I want your face exactly." And really don't think about this in a really creepy way, but just think of this as, my make-a-wish. So anyway, Superman obliged, and he gave this guy his face. And this guy, I guess he was able to resume his career as Superman on TV, but it also turns out that he actually is a celebrity in and of itself of being a pseudo Superman. So he would actually make appearances as pseudo Superman. And he became such kind of enamored at Superman that he actually does impersonate his voice. So by anyone seeing him, they're gonna think this is the real Superman. We turn to Lois and Clark here. They're talking amongst each other, whispering. We're told that Gregory Reed, that's the guy who's pseudo Superman, and Lois is quite impressed with him, and she's actually comparing him to the real Superman, noting that this guy, okay, maybe he inflates the suit a little and stuff like that, but he's pretty close to the man I lust for. And it turns out Clark has also some interest in this actor too. He's saying what a great guy this guy is, Greg, and that he actually does charity work, the same way Superman does. Now, the problem with Superman and charity work is that he tends to clown on some of the charitable recipients, I should say, particularly if they're kids. In a story I had done a review of, Superman actually kind of clowns some blind kids. And even in the Superboy issue, he kind of sort of clowns a blind kid. But nevertheless, the two are acting. They seem both quite taken with Greg here. And Lois is kind of a little jealous. Her antenna goes up because she notes that Clark called him Greg, rather than something more formal like Mr. Reed or Gregory. And it seems like Lois is thinking, "Hey, Clark, do you actually know this guy? Because you're given all this kind of familiar energy about it." But Clark is able to brush this off by just simply saying, "Listen, I just called him by his first name. Reporter's license." And then we're given a note that the two actually had met in Action Comics 414. So anyway, Pseudo Superman, he ends the TED Talk at this point. He asks for charitable donations, kind of like one of those pay-as-you-exit deals. And it turns out that he has a large crowd of people swarming him, kind of wanting an autograph, kind of wanting to be in his, his aura, and kind of have that reflective glory of Superman. So this means that Lois and Clark, they kind of have to wait before they can interview him. But nevertheless, they do get an opportunity to interview him. And it's very telling of both pseudo-Superman and the real Superman. So anyway, Lois is kind of like talking to pseudo-Superman here. And she's asking him, "Hey, you kind of look like Superman, sound like Superman, kind of smell like Superman a little, but you're not really Superman. And have you ever thought what it would be like to be Superman, to have those powers?" But Greg says, "No, I know exactly how that feels." And he's explaining to Lois that Superman felt that it might be kind of a good idea to have this kind of doppelganger version of himself. So he developed a red pill that would empower Greg for about 12 hours. And he wouldn't have the complete package of what Superman can do, but he would have a lot of the impressive powers. So at least pseudo Superman can kind of, fake it till he makes it. And Pseudo Superman is telling this one story, which he believes is kind of heartwarming, and Cary Bates probably believed it was heartwarming, and it just shows what a horrible dick Superman is. So it turned out that Superman had got a request from a dying girl, that she would like to meet him, before she passes on. And, that's kind of her make a wish. But it turned out Superman was busy at the time. Now, okay, I can understand. Okay, now both these situations, there's kind of a time clock here. You have the dying girl, and then you have this crisis, which he doesn't know whether he can hold off on that or not. But what he does is that he contacts Greg and Pseudo Superman, and he says to him, "Hey, can you go visit this dying girl and tell her you're me?" And this way that she'll kind of sort of get to meet Superman, even though she really isn't. And they agreed to this. And it turned out that, Greg kind of performed, kind of lied to her. And the little girl, she just passed on without knowing she was clowned by Superman. We see from the panel here as Greg is telling this story, Clark actually walks away and gets some punch. I'm thinking Clark is taking that punch and he's like pouring himself a victory drink for saying, "Another child clowned again." And it turns out the pill works for 12 hours. So he's able to be Superman, or a good facsimile of Superman, for about 12 hours. Take a look. One thing about these comics is that there's a lot of ads in them. And the reason why mid-70s comics had a lot of ads was that there was an accounting error that led the comic book publishers believe that it was actually the ads that was the profit driver for comics and not comic book sales. And because of this error, comic book companies started soliciting and printing more ads. And this had gone on for a few years. And then what had happened was that when Jim Shooter had took over Marvel, he was told of this, and it didn't sound right to him. And he arranged an audit of the books to see exactly what was going on. And it turned out Jim Shooter was right, and that there wasn't an accounting mistake, and printing all those extra ads was actually a money loser for the comic book companies. And because of this, they cut back on the number of ads. So if you're ever wondering why there's so many ads in these 1970s comics, this is why. So then we see Pseudo Superman. He's hit dead on with a laser beam, which we had been told earlier came from outer space. Everyone's surprised here. The beam itself is invisible, so they didn't see the beam, although they see the effects. And we see that Pseudo Superman has been kind of thrown into the water fountain. I'm guessing that the Metropolis Civic Center was based on Lincoln Center, because that's what it looks like the artist drew. So anyway, they're checking on Pseudo Superman, and it turns out that it looks like he's knocked out, and everyone's kind of confused at this moment as to what had happened. Clark Kent, he takes the opportunity to kind of slip away and to change into Superman. This is not a big deal because people know that this is Pseudo Superman. And then we see Superman flying into the center. We see a big word balloon, but wait. So the narrator is kind of interrupting the action. I think this is Cary Bates trying to get the comic book readers to read a little more carefully. So it turns out that that there's a spaceship orbiting the Earth at this moment. And it turns out that it's members of the Superman Revenge Squad. And this is a group that has appeared in various issues of Superman, kind of on and off. They're very Silver Age, and you can kind of see it here in the design of the aliens. They honestly kind of look like blue versions of the Honeymooners here. And it turns out that the alien that was manning the laser, he had hit pseudo Superman, which is what you would expect the reader to think is a good thing, but it actually is a bad thing from the Superman Revenge Squad's point of view. And the thing is that this is sort of an unexcusable mistake by this gunner. And the reason is that the Superman Revenge Squad, they know Clark Kent is Superman. So the fact that Clark Kent was there and Superman was there, the leader of the mission is thinking that this guy should have known to go for Clark Kent. In addition, they actually do have scanners that would detect which one is the real Superman, probably because the actual Superman would be kind of emanating some type of energy, and that's something that their monitors can track. So we're getting a little bit of expository dialogue here. This is mostly for the sake of the readers, because they may not know too much about the Superman Revenge Squad. Now it turns out there's a couple of things that have kind of thrown them off here. Was that Greg was affected by the beam, because before blasting off on this mission, I guess they were debriefed on the weapon that they're going to be using. And they were told that the weapon would have no effect on humans. So if they actually hit a human with this weapon, nothing would happen to them. It's a weapon specifically designed, for Superman's, biophysics. And the concern here is that because of this misfire, this might actually raise the actual Superman's suspicions. So they're worried that, at least the captain here is worried that they might have given away that they are hunting for Superman. But it kind of, looks like they're gonna give it another try. And they're checking their sensors, and they know Clark Kent's there, so they're gonna. Oh no, Clark had already changed to Superman, so the real Superman's there. They know that, so they fire a second bolt, and this bolt hits the target. So it hits the actual Superman as he's flying in, and we can see Greg is still unconscious here. Honestly, he wasn't in the water that long. So Superman kind of surmises that Greg probably swallowed some water and that he's having a little trouble breathing. He's kind of like, yeah, I might want to get this guy to a hospital. So then it turns out the beam did hit Superman. So right now the Superman Revenge Squad, these guys are pretty happy about what had happened. And what it turns out to be is that the beam that hit Superman will affect his biochemistry when he exerts his superpowers 10 times. So when he attempts 10 super feats, that will trigger some type of biochemical reaction that will poison Superman. So that's their plan. So at this point, they're not going to actively confront Superman. They're just simply going to count the number of super feats he completes. And once the number hits 10, then he'll be poisoned. So anyway, go to another scene. It's a few hours later. It's a parachuting group. And they're going out for a jump, and they had just jumped out of the airplane. But it turns out there was a little drama between the three parachutists and the pilot. Turns out the pilot was a member of this group, and he got kicked out of the group. Um, you know what? Um, those must have been some pretty serious issues to get kicked out of a parachute group. So anyway, but nevertheless, apparently they were okay with this guy piloting a plane as they make a jump from it. And it turned out that the pilot, the disgruntled member, he had crazy glued their gloves. So he had applied crazy glue to their gloves because he knew that what they were planning on doing was a jump where they're holding each other's hands. But the thing is, because of the crazy glue and because they're holding each other's hands, they can't pull the rip cords. And if they can't pull the rip cords, it's going to be splat for these guys. But it turns out that as they're kind of surmising what had happened, this way they can fully comprehend their impending death here. Superman flies in at this moment, and he's going to rescue the parachuters, but he does not do so in the most responsible way. At this point, he could probably just kind of land them on the ground, although he might end up breaking their arms. But what he does, he pulls the rip cords for them, and all three of their parachutes activate right next to each other, which in an actual world would just simply tangle with each other and then fall like a rock. But again, this is not happening here, and the parachutists have been saved, and Superman's going to go after the pilot for attempted murder. I'm going to take a look at a quick in-house ad, take a look at it quickly. See, around this time, DC was publishing The Amazing World of DC. It's kind of like an insider look at DC Comics. Kind of similar. It's similar to what Marvel was doing with Voom. And apparently in this issue, you get an exclusive interview with Jules Swartz, a sneak preview of DC's 1975 lineup. In 1975, DC released a ton of new titles. And what had happened was the market share of the comic book industry had really started turning into Marvel's favor. This is when Marvel just started taking over and being the premier comic book company. And Carmine Infantino, who was the publisher in chief at the time at DC Comics, he didn't want to lose market space to Marvel, so he just had literally a bunch of titles commissioned and put out. If I remember correctly, I think the only thing that had caught on was Warlord, and that was a Mike Grell title. And see, they found an unpublished Golden Age Green Lantern story. I would not want to read that. I'm sorry, I don't like Golden Age comic books. Comics go to college. Yeah, people were actually surprised that college students were reading comics. I always found it amusing that, at 7 and 8 years old, I was, reading stuff that college kids were reading. Shazam on TV. That was a fun TV show, if anyone remembers it. That was, they had the two Shazams. They had Jackson Boswick, who actually looked like what you would expect Captain Marvel to look like. Very athletic, lean guy. And then you had his replacement, John Davy, who kind of seemed like he had the pot belly of steel. And from what I understand, Jackson Boswick, he was injured and he didn't show up to work for a few days. And Filmation thought he was holding out for a higher salary. So they just fired him on the spot. And they just brought in this new Captain Marvel who kind of sort of looked like him. And I was kind of fine with both those Captain Marvels. It's not like those stories were really great. It was mostly like dealing with school truants and joyriders and stuff. Although I do remember, I think there was a 2-episode arc about drug use. And that works its way into the second story. And just some art by, Carmine Infantino, Gil Kane, Joe Kubek. And underneath are the DC titles that you can order by mail. Okay, going to go back to this story. And we see our middle-aged gangsters are watching the parachutists as they're coming down. Now, they don't give one crap what happens to these parachutists or whether they lived or died. But they were there to watch whether Superman was going to utilize, his superpowers, which he did. So I think at this point, their count is at 4 super feats. Then it turns out Lois and Clark, they're at the hospital because remember, Greg Reed was injured. And it turns out that his condition is kind of serious here in that he's actually bedridden and he has an oxygen tank. And usually that was the sign that someone was really, really badly off. And they're not quite sure about Reed's condition, whether he'll pull it out or not. Clark just starts crying. He just starts crying. He has his friend. He has, his pseudo Superman, and Clark is thinking about life without him, and then he really starts breaking up. And he just starts sobbing like a child. He does this in front of Lois too. I mean, he's taking one for the team, because you talk about demasculation here. Lois is telling Clark to get a hold of himself, and that hey, this is not the darkest part of the dawn here. We see that the Superman Revenge Squad, they're monitoring these events from their spaceship in orbit. And they're noting Clark Kent crying here and how emotional he is. Now, the Superman Revenge Squad, they know that Clark Kent is Superman. And their scientists told them that when the ray is used on Superman, he might become very emotional. So this is simply to lead on the Superman Revenge Squad that that the ray is affecting Superman here. Like I said, the story is more convoluted than complicated. However, they're noting the condition of pseudo Superman, since this is the room they're in. But the thing is, the Superman Revenge Squad was told that he shouldn't have been affected by the ray. But he is. So this is kind of stowing a little doubt in the minds of the Superman Revenge Squad. Now to kind of speculate on what's going on with the twist and the twist and the twist. Remember, Greg Reed said that he had taken a pill that would have given him some of Superman's powers for about a 12-hour period. So probably because of the pill being active, he must have still had some of that residual energies that come from Kryptonian bodies like Superman. So the reason why the actor appears to be affected by the ray was that because he probably had still some of Superman's energies. Okay, so again, more convoluted than complicated. So then the next night, we go to the Metropolis Harbor. And it turns out that there's a very large shark in the harbor that Superman is apparently grinding on. Now, this would have been popular imagery at the time in comic books because of the great success of Jaws. And because of this, the comic book companies would figure out how to draw a shark in whatever story they were working on. I imagine this shark is not coming back to Metropolis Harbor. He's probably in need of some therapy after basically being groped by Superman here. And then it turns out there's a fire in an industrial park here. Superman puts it out. The Superman Revenge Squad, they're following these adventures as they're happening. Right now, the super feed is up to 8, so their count is 8 at this moment. So they're simply just waiting for two more super feats, and then that's when the poison will be activated. So now we go to the Galaxy building. This is the media company that Clark Kent works for and Lois Lane. I think Perry White is still a part of this universe, but he handles the print edition of the media empire, the Daily Planet, and it turns out that it's really the broadcast um, center that's really kind of the star at this time. Clark Kent had moved over from writing for the Daily Planet to being the WGB's, head newscaster. So anyway, they're in the offices. Clark is very upset here about something. He's holding his hanky, and he just kind of looks a little lost there. And then Steve Lumbar comes in. Steve Lumbar is the sports reporter for the station, but he's also Clark Kent's foil. So I guess they wanted to create some type of kind of like a personal life with Clark Kent, because that was one of the problems I had with DC, was that it was just simply most of the time an action story, and there was no real character development. So I guess also this is an attempt to kind of create kind of like a Marvel environment, something that you would see in the Daily Bugle with the way that Peter Parker would interact in the Daily Bugle offices. I always loved that part of Spider-Man. And in fact, at one point in my Spider-Man readings and fandom, I actually preferred the adventures of Peter Parker to Spider-Man. And I remember some comics, I would just go to the Peter Parker parts, and I would really pay attention to what was going on with his interpersonal drama. And then I kind of, okay, I'll just read the Spider-Man stuff now. So anyway, Steve Lumbar, he's with an attractive intern, guess kind of like a young Annette O'Toole. So anyway, she's actually pretty excited to meet Clark Kent, because she sees this guy every night on her TV screen, because he's the lead anchor for the newscast. But Steve is kind of making a play for this young woman, and he wants to discourage her from being interested in Clark. Also, his main objective in this this office space, is to kind of bully Clark Kent here. But the thing is, it never works out for Steve. So while Steve tries to make Clark the butt of his jokes, it turns out that Steve's usually the butt of the joke in general. So anyway, so Steve's kind of putting Clark down in front of this young woman. This is how he gains points with her. I hated guys who did that. It happened a lot in school, and then less as I got older. But I hated guys who would try to score points by putting another guy down in front of her. So anyway, that's how Steve rolls though, because he has that kind of Biff Tannen energy, I should say. So anyway, Steve insults Clark. Clark starts crying, and the young woman here just feels sorry for Clark, just seeing him in tears. Even Steve's thrown off by this, saying, hey, I was just kidding. This is like they're back in grade school at this time, where one person accidentally hurt the feelings of the other person. Anyway, Steve is surprised by how Clark is being so sensitive, and it turns out Clark is kind of agreeing with that. Yeah, I just haven't been myself. I don't understand why I'm being so sensitive too. Kind of a funny back and forth here, where we see Clark saying, "I just haven't been myself lately," and Steve saying, "which should be an improvement, but somehow isn't." That's actually, I thought, was kind of like a nice little bit of banter. The young woman here actually did not like the way Steve rolled. Kind of thought he was a jerk. So Steve ended up being the butt of the joke, because he didn't end up with the girl. I'm going to go to in-house ad. This is for the DC Treasuries. These are the oversized comics. I had mentioned this before, where the comic book distributors wanted higher priced items on the newsstand, because the problem was that comic books sold extremely well, but because the price point was so low, the profits, could have been better, because it's hard to kind of split up that dime and turn it into profit. These are various reprints. I think Ghost was actually the very first of the Treasury editions. Yeah, there's one of Rudolph and the Super Friends. I don't think I only think I had the Batman one. I think that was the only one I had, and the Superman one. It was fun reading those early Superman issues where he's like champion of the New Deal. So anyway, we go back to the story. There are two cars. They're about to collide, and then Superman comes between them and saves both the drivers from a direct head-on collision. And according to the Superman Revenge Squad, this is super feat number 9, which means that one more super feat, and it should activate the poison that they had injected in Superman through that space beam. And they're kind of orbiting the Earth, and then they see an event where a young child has fallen off a balcony. Superman sees this. He flies in, he swoops in, and he saves the child. But immediately upon reaching the ground, Superman kind of doubles over in pain, as we had seen in the splash page. The little kid's surprised here, which is understandable. And then it turns out the Superman Revenge Squad, upon seeing this, they felt that their mission was completed, that they had done what they intended to do, and that they're going to fly back to their home base. The leaders of the Superman Revenge Squad, he congratulates the crew on a job well done. You did some nice murking here. You basically ended our brand, because without any Superman, why search for revenge? But nevertheless, we're kind of like a forward-thinking organization. We'll find other ways to make money, and we'll just change our name. So anyway, we're told by the narrator, but wait, as the Superman Revenge Squad ship is flying to their home base. And then we go back to Earth. We see Pseudo Superman. He's being told that he can come back to life now. He can stop acting. And it turns out that this is the real Superman, Pseudo Superman, which is the actor Greg Reed. And Superman is thanking him for a great performance as being him. And the thing was, this was done to kind of basically fool the Superman Revenge Squad. And again, this is where the convolution of the story is. So what had happened is that Superman was aware of the Superman Revenge Squad's plan. And then he enlisted Greg to help him out here. And the thing is that since Superman knew that 10 super feats would be required to activate the poison, and because Superman's not going to leave the world in a lurch without him, it turned out that the real Superman and the pseudo Superman, they were splitting the super feats. So when the Revenge Squad thought that there was only the one Superman, because they had saw Greg Reed in the hospital, so they assumed that he was out of action, and they saw 10 super feats from the one Superman on their monitor screen, they figured, they had done the job. But the thing was, it turned out the two Supermans were kind of alternating. Again, Cary Bates is being so damn convoluted here. So anyway, Pseudo Superman can't figure out one thing. And I can't figure out a lot of things with this story. But turns out Pseudo Superman doesn't understand why real Superman knew the entire plan. And it turned out it was this. When real Superman took Pseudo Superman out of the fountain, Superman noticed a reflection in the water that was the Superman Revenge flying ship in orbit. Again, Cary Bates, man. And it turns out from this, Superman knew that the Revenge Squad was orbiting the planet, and because of his like superpowers, he knew where the ship was, and he was able to use his super hearing to overhear them explain their plan. And it turned out that the thing was is that as Superman was taking pseudo Superman to the hospital, real Superman had whispered to pseudo Superman that just pretend that you're in a coma, and I'll explain what we need to do. So it turned out that when pseudo Superman Greg Reed was in a coma, he was actually acting. And because the Superman Revenge Squad was watching all this, they got the characters confused. It turned out the one trick thing was that neither of them could be active at the same time. Otherwise, their monitors would pick it up. So anyway, pseudo Superman, he asked real Superman, "Hey, why'd you let those guys go? Aren't you going to do anything about it?" Superman says, "Nah, I don't have to." He says, "Nah, I don't have to. The Superman Revenge Squad, those guys will take care of it. Because those guys, they have zero tolerance." And what happened is, as the ship is getting closer to the base, the leaders of the Superman Revenge Squad, they prepare their homecoming for this crew, and they're blown out of orbit. So these three guys have been murked. And this is a behavior that Superman has done from time to time. Whenever he deals with the Superman Revenge Squad, he actually will make no effort to punish them. Rather, he'll let them go back to their home base, knowing that they're going to get some type of horrible punishment. There was one issue of Action Comics where he was battling the Superman Revenge Squad, and they had failed, of course, and they had gone back to their home planet. And it turned out that the punishment for their failure was that they were going to be lifelong slaves. And Superman was just chucking it up, saying, "Hey, there's no Harry Tubmans up on that planet. And those guys are going to be pounding rocks for the rest of their lives." So, there are forms of slavery that Superman does approve of. And that's it. Oh, that's actually not it. There's one other thing. The poison. So the poison that the Superman Revenge Squad had used will eventually work its way out of their bodies. So this is why Superman can continue to do his super feats without worrying about being poisoned. And we're told that the next issue will be another one somewhat centered around Lois Lane. They want to get Lois on those covers, and I'll probably look at that. I'm going to take a look at the Green Arrow and Black Canary story. The title is "Find Black Canary, Dead or Alive." And the creative team is Mike Grell and Elliot Magden. Elliot Magden was a pretty good writer, in my opinion. Mike Grell actually does have first credit as far as the story. So I'm thinking this is probably something that was more from Mike Grell than Elliot Magden. Elliot Magden obviously would help guide him through this, because at this time Mike Grell was pretty new, just as an artist, much less a writer. And we see that the book is edited by two of the big editors at DC, which is Jules Schwartz and E. Nelson Bidwell. So yeah, there was actually quite a lot of production put into this story. It's a pretty good story. It's one I could see that Mike Grell came up with, because from what I understand, he had said that the comics that influenced him to get into comic book art were the Green Lantern, Green Arrow issues from Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, and of course within that great series there was the famous drug issues. So I'm thinking that Mike Grell might have been a little inspired by that to kind of come up with this story. It is a two-parter, and I'll start going into it right now. See a young woman here. She seems actually quite content with what's going on. She's definitely living her best life. She kind of has that Christina Hendrickson or maybe 1970s Tina Louise look to her. So anyway, she's walking out into the night air. She's leaving a very high status neighborhood here, and it looks like she's leaving kind of a mansion complex. And it turns out that this is actually a somewhat well-known person in Star City. She's known as a social therapist, although she probably would be called a life coach today. So she's something of a kind of a well-known figure. I guess she's kind of like one of these therapists to the star types. And it turns out that she has kind of an unusual formula for her patients to say get over depression. And basically she recommends gambling. She says that, if you're having some troubles with your life, you should just gamble them away. Just go to the nearest casino and kind of just, let it roll on the dice, which is obviously terrible real life advice. But nevertheless, this is what we're told. She has no conscience about this. However, as she's heading to her car and about to drive off, she's immediately interrupted by the Green Arrow. The Green Arrow was watching her from afar. So then when he saw her, he came down from a rope. And he apparently he caught her by surprise. So she kind of lets out a little scream. It appears that Green Arrow knows of this woman, and he's asking her for her help. Now, the woman recognizes the Green Arrow, so she's a little taken aback. She's like, "Oh, the superhero here," and she becomes a little bit more trusting, although Green Arrow kind of immediately kind of throws that trust away by saying, "We got to get behind these bushes. Take my word for it. Just come with me behind those bushes." But she goes ahead, and it turns out that Green Arrow is in the middle of a criminal investigation. It turns out that Black Canary has been captured, and the Green Arrow wants to track her down. We see that Sherry is listening to the story very intently, and Green Arrow is going through a flashback here. Apparently, what had started this was that a young man that Oliver Queen knows is going through a drug problem, and the mother was very concerned about what was happening to the son, and she had asked, Green Arrow, can you come over and have an intervention with my son? So anyway, Green Arrow, he's telling the son about the dangers of drugs, that, your brother ended up on the slab, and you don't want to be like him, always, strung out.
You are strung out. Oh, by God, I'll tell you something, friend. I have never been strung out in my life, except on music.
Anyway, and he says, listen, there's a high price for what you're doing, and you can pay for it.
That is dangerous. That is damaging to myself, to my little daughter, to my father, to my friends, my doctor, to everybody, my relationship with you, my relationship with people on the stage. It is dangerous.
At a very young age, because he looks like he's about 18, 19 years old. He's not hearing it, though, the kid. So he tells Green Arrow,
I will pull your goddamn tongue out by the roots!
He sees the Green Arrow as the kind of authority figure. So this is kind of like a little bit of twist here, because in the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams run, Green Arrow was kind of like the rebel and the anti-establishment voice. But by this young man, he just sees Green Arrow as a part of the establishment. So Green Arrow, he decides what he's going to do is that since the young man won't take his advice about stop, you know, using drugs, he's going to cut off the entire drug supply for the entire city, just so this one little edict is, is followed through. So it turns out the Green Arrow, he figured out who's the probable leader of the drug trade in Star City, and he identifies this guy as Max Lucker. And it turns out that Max Lucker is the man who owns the casino that Sherry had just left, the illicit casino. So that's the connection there. Now, at this time, we're told that there was a confrontation between Green Arrow and Max Lucker. It looks like his henchman kind of got the bad part of that confrontation. Lucker himself is pinned to the wall, but nevertheless, he's defiant, and he's not afraid of the Green Arrow. Green Arrow, he had to kind of take the L at this point because he didn't catch Max Lucker doing anything illegal at that point. So Green Arrow, as he's Oliver Twist here, Oliver's not Oliver Twist, Oliver Queen. He's talking to his girlfriend, Black Canary, who's Diane Lance. Those two kind of had an unusual relationship in the DC universe, as they're not married, but they're clearly closer than just dating. And they kind of had to massage the fact that these two are probably sleeping with each other, or at the very least, or the most, kind of like, common law man and wife. See Black Canary here, she's drawn very beautifully. She's in her blonde wig, and it turns out that Max Lucker has a thing for blondes. So they're going to use that as a way for her to infiltrate, Max Lucker's criminal operations. So after some kind of like studying and kind of stalking Max Lucker, Black Canary gets herself into a situation where she can actually interact with Max Lucker on a social level. And we see that as the two are getting closer, they don't exactly spell out what exactly Black Canary was doing. I'm hoping that, I'm kind of hoping that Black Canary didn't hoe herself out. I don't think so, but nevertheless, because of this relationship that that Black Canary was able to have with Max Lucker, she's been able to get a lot of good information on him. Because of the information that Black Canary was able to find out about the Lucker organization, Green Arrow was able to go to work and to kind of take it apart. We see here he interrupts Lucker's numbers operation here. It turns out Lucker also has a large arsenal of weapons, and it looks like Green Arrow has taken that out too. And we see also a couple of young henchmen here being treated rather roughly here, and it looks like they're bagmen. And if you're not aware of it, bagmen are the guys who deliver and take the bribes. And they're considered the lowest guys on the criminal organization level because they're just basically errand boys. So anyway, he's making a big dent in Lucker's organization. He knows there's a snitch. And he went about and he found out who the snitch was. And it was the young blonde that he suddenly started taking some interest in. And he figured out that was the Black Canary. They have her held hostage. And Lucker sends a tape to the police precinct saying that, listen, we have her, and tell the Green Arrow that, he's not going to see her back. Green Arrow's very upset about this. So this is why he wants to storm into the casino, because apparently the casino is basically the headquarters for this this organization. And Green Arrow wants to use Sherry to help him do it. And he does so because he knows her by reputation, and he feels that that he can trust her, that she's a well-known public figure, and he kind of has at least somewhat of a background check on her, and he feels that she's a trustworthy person. And apparently the drug arm of this empire is a cartel, actually. So it's not just Lucker; it's also some other members. They call themselves the Four Horsemen. Horse was a slang word for heroin at the time, so there's probably a little bit of play on words there. So Green Arrow isn't entirely sure whether Black Canary has been murked or not. So this is why he wants to kind of storm the casino quietly and see whether he can save the Black Canary or not. Sherry agrees to this, she's saying, listen, she's a hot chick, I understand, we can't have her killed, and we don't need another angry guy, so I'll take care of you. So anyway, Sherry goes back into the casino. Again, some nicely drawn artwork here. The thing is, Green Arrow gave her a phone number. He had to run back to whatever payphone that number belongs to and hope that it's free. It turns out it is, so Green Arrow is at the payphone, and he gets Sherry's call. And Arrow says that he'll be there in about 5 minutes, and he wants her to set up a diversion. Now, I don't know how he was able to sell Sherry into doing this, because his pitch was, listen, I sent in Black Canary, who's a seasoned superhero. She might have gotten murked in this, I'm not sure. So can you take care of what I had asked her? And I'm not quite sure how he sold that to her, but he did. Although we'll find out later in the story how he did that. So Sherry's reporting that she's not seeing any henchmen in the casino right now. This kind of looks like, again, the upscale, beautiful people here. And they're just simply gambling away. So anyway, with this news, Green Arrow starts to enter the casino. And he does so by climbing the side of the building. And he's entering the second floor. And he's going through a window here. And he's not expecting any resistance. But it turns out there is resistance. It turns out one of Lucker's henchmen is waiting at the window for him. And he swings a 2x4 aimed at Arrow's head, but he catches it just before it makes contact with it. So at this point, he's surprised that there was a henchman, but his reflexes were fast enough that he didn't get seriously hurt here. Take a look at in-house ad. It's for 2 treasuries here. One is the Shazam one, and the other is Wonder Woman, which is understandable given the TV popularity. We'll go back to the story. And we see that the henchman is thrown out of this second floor window here. This guy is probably going to be in a wheelchair. And this alerts Lucker's other henchmen to Arrow's presence there. And they immediately rush him. However, he's handling the situation very well. He doesn't even have to use his arrows here, as he's just physically pounding Lucker's henchmen here. He's being fired on by some machine gun fire. However, Arrow takes the opportunity to use one of his exploding arrows here. And he immediately breaks into Lucker's main office here. And this, of course, is where Lucker is, some of his henchmen, and the Black Canary. So at this point, they didn't actually kill Black Canary as of yet. Green Arrow, he immediately frees Black Canary here with one of his trick arrows. And she rushes toward him, but not to thank him, but actually to warn him. Because it turned out one of Lucker's henchmen, who was in the office, was about to hit Green Arrow from behind with a chair. So her flying leap here saved Green Arrow. Green Arrow is able to pin Lucker in a corner, and because he has the goods on him, he feels that, hey, I can arrest this guy, and Lucker, you're gonna run out of luck. So Green Arrow, he uses his arrows to pin Lucker because he's not gonna kill him at this point, but he wants to put him in jail. Green Arrow needs to know where the other 4 horsemen are. So he wants to know where the rest of the cartel is. And obviously Lucker is not going to give up that information. In fact, he tells Green Arrow that, listen, I'm not even the guy you're really looking for. And you think I'm the boss, but I'm actually really a middleman here. I'm not one of the cartel members. And then from behind, we see Sherry here holding a gun, and she informs both Green Arrow and Black Canary that she's actually the head of the cartel, of the drug cartel, and that they need to raise their hands and give up. So at this point, Sherry has gotten the drop on Green Arrow and Black Canary, and the conclusion is in the next issue of Action Comics. I'll probably read it simply because I want to see the conclusion of this. So I'm going to look at the letters page. Most of it was complimentary. It seems like the fans like Superman teaming up with the Flash. And another letter is asking whether Crypto, not the currency, but the dog, is he going to make any type of return to Action Comics since they have the B story. I think they did bring back Crypto for one issue. And someone's complimenting the Superman story in issue number 441, but they disliked the Green Arrow issue. And again, they're talking about. So what the hell is he saying? We see one letter that's complimenting the Superman story in issue number 441, but mostly he has things to say about the Green Arrow issue. It looks like he liked the art and he liked the script. He's just asking some questions. So that's it. And this is my review of Action Comics, issue number 445, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.